The American Pulse studio was ablaze with lights, a blinding inferno against the backdrop of a nation deeply divided. The atmosphere was electric, yet taut, with an almost unbearable tension, as thousands of eyes, both in the live audience and glued to screens across the country, eagerly awaited what was promised to be an unprecedented showdown. On one side stood Karoline Leavitt, a name that had rocketed into the political stratosphere, a young political star with a razor-sharp demeanor and a reputation for fearless, unyielding confrontation. On the other hand, Barack Obama, former U.S. President, an icon of calm and authority, his very presence a testament to a legacy that many consider unassailable. The stage was set, the gladiators in place, and the air crackled with the unspoken promise of a political earthquake. Without keeping the audience waiting a moment longer, the host appeared, a figure of resonant, commanding voice, stepping onto the stage as if personally carrying the immense weight of the event about to unfold. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice powerful and full of vigor, sweeping over the hushed audience, "welcome to a historic moment. Tonight we will witness a debate that is not merely an exchange, but a quest for truth in a deeply divided era." The audience's eyes, wide and unblinking, were glued to the two figures at the center of the stage. Karoline, impeccably dressed in a sharp navy suit, her gaze like unwavering flames held a fierce intensity. Across from her, Obama remained composed, his eyes sharp yet guarded, a subtle hint of the battle to come. The host, with a dignified demeanor, stepped to the side, his voice echoing with authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, in a context where only 30% of Americans trust the media, according to a Gallup survey, the question of journalistic integrity is at the heart of the debate," he declared, his gaze sweeping the audience, forging a direct, almost personal connection. "Karoline, as a spokesperson for the MAGA movement, you have fiercely criticized how the media shapes politics. Karoline, please share your perspective on Mr. Obama's role in steering the press." Karoline sat upright, her posture rigid, her gaze scanning the audience for a fleeting moment before locking on to Obama. Her voice, when it came, was low, but sharp as an arrow, piercing the expectant silence. "Thank you. I'm here tonight to expose how Mr. Obama orchestrated media campaigns to attack Mitt Romney in 2012 and Donald Trump in 2016, undermining voter trust and subverting the very essence of fair elections." The audience fell silent, a palpable shift in the atmosphere. Some nodded slowly, a silent agreement rippling through their section, while others murmured in dissent, their faces etched with disbelief. Karoline continued, her voice rising, like a torrent sweeping through the studio, gaining momentum with every word. "Mr. Obama, you claim to be a uniter, a bridge builder, but behind the scenes, you coordinated with media outlets to craft negative narratives, to tear down opponents with a precision that was anything but accidental." She gestured with a sharp, decisive movement, and the large screen behind them flickered to life, displaying a damning timeline. Key dates in 2012 and 2016, juxtaposed with a barrage of negative headlines about Romney and Trump. "These stories didn't appear by chance," she asserted, her voice like a blade cutting through the charged air. "They were the result of a deliberate, calculated strategy you personally directed." The audience stirred, a mix of applause and jeers, erupting, a microcosm of the nation's own deep divisions. The host interjected, his voice formal, attempting to ground the moment in a broader reality. "Karoline, you raise a pressing issue, especially when social media platforms like X have become information battlegrounds, amplifying both truth and falsehoods. Mr. Obama, as a leader who shaped public policy and communicated through the media, she accuses you of orchestrating smear campaigns. How do you respond?" Obama leaned forward, his expression serious, his voice calm but firm. a stark contrast to Karoline's fiery delivery. "Thank you for the question, Karoline. Your accusations are entirely false. I have always respected press freedom and never directed any campaign to attack opponents. The press operates independently, and what you're presenting is fabricated." Obama's supporters in the audience erupted in cheers, a wave of relief and affirmation. But Karoline didn't flinch. "Independent?" she asked, her voice like a chilling gust, directly challenging his assertion. A cold wind sweeping through the studio. "Then explain why you met with media leaders right before negative stories about Romney and Trump surged." She pulled out a set of documents, holding them up for the cameras to capture, their pages rustling ominously. "This is a list of meetings between you and major editors in 2012 and 2016. This isn't journalism, Mr. Obama. It's manipulation." She pressed a button, and the screen instantly displayed an internal email, stark white text on black. An advisor's words, chillingly clear, pushed the narrative about Romney's business record. The studio audience fell silent, the weight of the accusation settling heavily in the air. The host, his voice now brimming with barely contained excitement, tied it back to the broader context. "Karoline, you've just raised a question about transparency, a sore point when only 16% of Americans believe the media is fair, according to Pew Research. Mr. Obama, as someone who led the nation through major media campaigns, she presents internal emails to accuse you of using the press as a political tool. How do you respond?" Obama shook his head, his voice firmer yet still controlled. "Karoline, your documents are not real. I never directed the media to attack anyone. The press reports based on facts, and I respect their role in democracy." Karoline smiled, a thin, knowing curve of her lips, her eyes never leaving Obama's. "The truth?" she asked, her voice like a beam of light piercing through the studio, cutting through his denial. "Then tell the voters why the negative articles perfectly aligned with your strategy." She pressed a button, and the screen displayed a report, its title stark: "Media Strategy, Amplify Anti-Opponent Narrative." "This report shows your team leaked negative information to the press," she said, her voice like a prosecutor delivering a final, damning verdict. "You didn't respect the press. You turned it into a political weapon." The audience remained utterly silent, the camera slowly panning across tense, wide-eyed faces, then returning to the stage. Karoline, in her powerful navy suit, stood tall, her eyes blazing with an unyielding spirit. Across from her, Barack Obama maintained his composure, but a hint of caution, a subtle flicker of concern, appeared in his eyes. The undeniable sign of a seasoned politician realizing the storm had truly irrevocably begun. The host, with his dignified demeanor and commanding presence, swiftly stepped to the center of the stage, his warm voice like a thread attempting to steady the rising heat of the atmosphere. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his tone firm yet composed, as public trust in the media continues to erode, with only about 34% of Americans believing the press reports accurately, according to a recent Gallup poll. The question Karoline raises about media ethics and the power of politicians is one we cannot ignore. He paused, allowing his words to sink in, his gaze connecting with the audience, as if drawing each person into the very heart of the clash. But today's debate goes beyond that. A palpable shift occurred in the studio, the air thickening with a new kind of anticipation. For in the context of escalating tensions in the Middle East, with drone attacks, sanctions, and negotiations intertwining, a critical question arises: what will America's role be? And more importantly, are the legacies left behind a step forward or a burden? He turned to Karoline, his voice maintaining its professional tone, but with a slight emphasis, as if paving the way for a sharp, unyielding rebuttal. "Karoline, With your strong stance on national security and global leadership, how do you assess the Iran nuclear deal under President Obama, one of the most celebrated yet controversial foreign policies of the past decade? The air on the stage seemed to freeze, making way for the next response, a battle of wits where every word could reshape historical memory and voter expectations. Karoline leaned forward, her eyes locked on Obama, a predatory glint in their depths. Her voice, when she spoke, was low but sharp as a blade, cutting through the silence. "Thank you, Mr. Host. Mr. Obama calls the Iran deal an achievement, a diplomatic triumph, but I'm here to expose it as a dangerous agreement, signed not for peace, but to polish his legacy at the expense of grave risks to America and our allies like Israel." The audience grew quiet, a mix of murmurs rippling through the crowd, some nodding in fervent agreement, others shaking their heads in vehement dissent. Karoline continued, her voice rising like a mighty river sweeping through the studio, gaining an unstoppable force. "You empowered Iran, Mr. Obama. You funded terrorism, and you demonstrably weakened regional security, leaving a volatile powder keg for the next administration." She gestured with a sharp, accusatory sweep of her hand, and the large screen behind them flickered to life, displaying a stark chart. Iran's military spending increased by 40% after the deal. The numbers glared, undeniable. "This isn't peace," she declared, her voice like an arrow flying straight and true, piercing the very heart of Obama's defense. "This is a concession that endangers the world." The host picked up, his voice now tinged with a barely concealed excitement, acknowledging the gravity of the unfolding drama. "Karoline, you call the deal a concession, a concern when recent reports show Iran's increased military spending, causing unease for allies like Israel. Mr. Obama, as the architect of the deal, you've claimed it blocked Iran's nuclear ambitions. She accuses you of endangering security. How do you respond?" Obama sat upright, his posture composed, his gaze steady, meeting Karoline's fiery intensity without flinching. His voice was low, clear, and deeply persuasive, building on Karoline's point about concession, yet twisting it to his advantage. "Thank you for the question, Karoline. Calling the deal a concession is false. This agreement stopped Iran from developing nuclear weapons, a fact recognized internationally as a diplomatic step forward." He paused, allowing his words to resonate. "Your chart lacks context, Karoline, and I completely reject the notion that it harms security." Obama's supporters in the audience erupted in applause, a wave of affirmation washing over him. But Karoline remained unshaken, a rock in the rising tide. "A diplomatic step forward," she asked, her voice like a chilling gust, directly challenging his claim of blocked nuclear weapons. "Then explain why Iran received $1.7 billion in cash right after the deal, which you call legitimate." She pressed a button, and the screen instantly displayed another internal email, its stark text a damning indictment. An official's words, chillingly clear: "Payment must be kept quiet to avoid controversy. This is funding terrorism." Karoline's voice, now like a prosecutor delivering a final crushing blow, built on Obama's step-forward claim. "You didn't bring peace, Mr. Obama. You armed the enemy." The studio audience fell silent, the weight of the accusation palpable, a collective gasp echoing through the room. The host, unable to hide his excitement, his voice ringing with renewed energy, leaned forward, steering the debate with tight and compelling connections. "Karoline, you've just labeled this payment funding terrorism, a highly sensitive issue, when reports of Iran's support for armed groups have sparked international controversy. Meanwhile, Mr. Obama, as a leader who championed multilateral diplomacy, now faces your criticism that he armed the enemy, backed by leaked internal emails. So how do you respond to this?" The atmosphere in the American Pulse studio thickened, primed for the next devastating counterstrike. The host, with his dignified demeanor and unwavering command of the stage, swiftly moderated the dialogue, guiding the audience to a new, equally volatile topic. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice firm yet composed, "while public opinion rages over foreign policy, another equally critical front is affecting every American family: healthcare." He scanned the room, his gaze forging a direct connection, as if inviting each person to reflect on a deeply personal issue. According to the latest Kaiser Family Foundation survey, nearly 50% of Americans express concern about prescription drug costs and their ability to afford medical services. This raises a major question about the healthcare legacy left by the Obama administration, specifically Obamacare. He turned to Karoline, his voice maintaining its professional tone, but with a slight emphasis, as if paving the way for a sharp, unyielding rebuttal. "Karoline, you frequently criticize the economic policies of the previous administration, particularly its market interventions. With that perspective, how do you view Mr. Obama's role in shaping and implementing the Affordable Care Act, and has it truly delivered the benefits promised?" The studio atmosphere seemed to hush, awaiting her response, not just an argument, but a statement that could reshape how millions viewed one of the most prominent and often most divisive policies. Over time, Karoline sat upright, her eyes locked on Obama, a steely resolve hardening her gaze. Her voice, when she spoke, was low but sharp as a blade, cutting through the expectant silence. "Thank you, Mr. Host. Mr. Obama calls Obamacare a healthcare milestone, a crowning achievement, but I'm here to expose it as a broken promise. Economically, harming Americans just to polish his legacy, sacrificing the well-being of millions for political optics." The audience grew silent, a palpable wave of mixed reactions rippling through the crowd, some nodding in fervent agreement, others murmuring in vehement dissent, their faces a canvas of conviction and disbelief. Karoline continued, her voice rising like a powerful torrent sweeping through the studio, gaining an unstoppable force. "You promised people could keep their doctors, keep their plans, but millions lost both, Mr. Obama, facing skyrocketing costs and dwindling choices." She gestured with a sharp, accusatory sweep of her hand, and the large screen behind them flickered to life, displaying a stark chart. Insurance costs rose 25% since Obamacare's implementation. The numbers glared, undeniable, a brutal indictment. "This isn't health care," she declared, her voice like an arrow piercing the very heart of Obama's defense. "This is an economic burden on Americans, a tax on their health and their livelihoods." The host stepped forward, the stage lights casting a soft glow on his face, his voice ringing with formality like a bridge extending the debate. "Karoline, you call Obamacare an economic burden, a controversial claim, especially as recent insurance. Industry reports show steadily rising costs, putting pressure on middle-class and low-income households." He turned to Obama, maintaining an objective yet incisive tone. "Mr. Obama, as the architect of the Affordable Care Act, you've claimed it expanded coverage to millions of Americans. Yet Karoline accuses this legacy of coming at an economic cost. How do you respond to the argument that your policy is harming the very people it was meant to help?" Obama sat upright, hands clasped firmly in front of him, his gaze steady, meeting Karoline's fiery intensity without flinching. When he spoke, his voice was low, clear, and deeply persuasive, carrying the measured rebuttal of a policymaker who had weathered many storms. "Thank you for the question, Karoline. Calling Obamacare a burden is not only an oversimplification, it's a distortion of the facts." He paused briefly, his eyes not leaving Karoline's, a subtle challenge in his gaze. "We expanded coverage to over 20 million Americans. That's not a promise, Karoline. It's a fact. The uninsured rate dropped to historic lows." His voice grew firmer, as if speaking for the millions who had directly benefited from the policy. The figures you cite about costs lack context. They don't account for the subsidies that helped millions afford coverage, don't mention the crucial protections for those with pre-existing conditions, and certainly don't compare to the medical costs that were already skyrocketing for decades prior to the law's passage. He leaned forward slightly, his voice resonating with conviction. This law isn't perfect, and I never claimed it was the final solution, but if we're talking about burdens, leaving millions to live without health insurance, facing medical bankruptcy, with every illness, that is the real burden, morally, economically, and socially. The audience fell silent, absorbing Obama's every word, but the studio atmosphere was primed for Karoline's inevitable counterstrike. The camera slowly panned to Karoline, her eyes icy, her expression unreadable, as if she were preparing her. Next, devastating response. Obama's supporters in the audience erupted in applause, a wave of affirmation washing over him, but Karoline didn't flinch. 20 million insured, she asked, her voice like a chilling gust, directly challenging the healthcare milestone claim, her tone dripping with skepticism. Then explain why millions lost their preferred plans due to Obamacare's regulations, Mr. Obama. Explain that broken promise. She pressed a button, and the screen instantly displayed another internal email, its stark text a damning indictment. An official's words, chillingly clear. Need to mitigate backlash over individual plan cancellations. Karoline's voice, now like a prosecutor delivering a final crushing blow, built on Obama's insurance point. This is proof you knew people would lose their insurance, Mr. Obama. You didn't improve healthcare. You pushed Americans into financial chaos. The studio audience fell silent, the weight of the accusation palpable, a collective gasp echoing through the room as the host prepared for the next inevitable escalation. The studio remained ablaze with lights, the atmosphere taut as a bowstring after the heated debate over media manipulation, the controversial Iran nuclear deal, and the broken promises of healthcare policy. The host, standing center stage with a dignified demeanor, spoke in a resonant voice, carrying the immense weight of guiding what felt less like a television program and more like a democratic tribunal. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, firm yet composed, his gaze sweeping across the audience. In an era where transparency is an urgent demand, the public grows increasingly skeptical of what happens behind the political curtain. The question of former leaders' roles after leaving office grows increasingly urgent. Many Americans question the behind-the-scenes influence, the forces believed to still shape the nation's direction even after leaving power. He paused, allowing his words to resonate, inviting each person into a broader, more profound inquiry. Karoline, he continued, turning to her, his voice maintaining its professional tone. With your firm stance on power transparency and post-tenure, accountability, I want to ask. Former President Obama pledged to step back from politics after leaving the White House. But given his statements, indirect advocacy campaigns, and the influence attributed to him in current political organizations and platforms, how do you assess his true role in the post-presidency period? The studio atmosphere seemed to hush, awaiting her response, not just an argument, but a statement that could redefine the understanding of power itself. Karoline sat upright, her eyes locked on Obama, a steely resolve hardening her gaze. Her voice, low but sharp as a blade, cut through the expectant silence. Thank you, Mr. Host. Mr. Obama claimed he would focus on philanthropy post-presidency, a noble pursuit. But I'm here to expose how he continued to manipulate American politics from behind the scenes through a vast network of non-profit organizations specifically designed to undermine the Trump administration and retain his grip on power. The audience fell silent, a palpable wave of mixed reactions rippling through the crowd, some nodding in fervent agreement, others murmuring in vehement dissent. Karoline continued, her voice rising, like a powerful stream sweeping through the studio, gaining an unstoppable force. He funded anti-Trump movements, stirring political chaos, deepening national divisions, all to maintain his influence. She gestured with a sharp, accusatory sweep of her hand, and the large screen behind them flickered to life, displaying a stark chart. Funding from Obama-linked organizations rose 50% from 2017 to 2020. The numbers glared, undeniable, a brutal indictment. "This isn't philanthropy," she declared, her voice like an arrow slicing through the air, piercing the very heart of Obama's defense. "This is a strategy to retain power, a deliberate subversion of the democratic process." The host interjected, his voice brimming with barely contained excitement, acknowledging the gravity of the unfolding drama. "Karoline, you call this a strategy to retain power, a concern as non-profits increasingly shape public policy, raising debates about transparency. Mr. Obama, Karoline accuses you of disrupting politics through funding movements. As a former leader who pledged non-interference, how do you respond?" Obama sat upright, his posture composed, his gaze steady, meeting Karoline's fiery intensity without flinching. His voice was low, clear, and deeply persuasive, building on Karoline's strategy point, yet twisting it to his advantage. "Thank you for the question, Karoline. Accusing me of manipulating from behind the scenes is entirely false." He paused. Briefly, his eyes not leaving Karoline's, a subtle challenge in his gaze. "Post-presidency, I focused on philanthropy and education, not political interference. Your chart lacks context, and I completely reject the notion that I undermined any administration." Obama's supporters in the audience erupted in applause, a wave of affirmation washing over him. But Karoline remained unshaken, a rock in the rising tide. "Education?" she asked, her voice like a chilling gust, directly challenging the non-interference claim, her tone dripping with skepticism. "Then explain why your organizations funded millions for anti-Trump movements, Mr. Obama." She pressed a button, and the screen instantly displayed another internal email, its stark text a damning indictment. An advisor's words, chillingly clear: "Increase funding to civic groups to maintain political pressure, her Barack Obama's directive." Karoline's voice, now like a prosecutor delivering a final crushing blow, built on Obama's philanthropy point. "This is proof you directed from the shadows, Mr. Obama. You didn't leave politics. You built a network to disrupt." The studio audience fell silent, the weight of the accusation palpable, a collective gasp echoing through the room. The host, his voice brimming with excitement, tied it back to the broader context. "Karoline, you claim Mr. Obama built a disruptive network, a sore point as NGOs increasingly influence politics, raising questions about transparency." "Mr. Obama, Karoline presents an internal email accusing you of sustaining political pressure. How do you respond to your post-presidency role?" Obama shook his head, his voice growing firmer, directly countering the string-pulling claim. "Karoline, calling me disruptive is misleading. That email isn't real. The organizations I'm linked to focus on civic education, promoting democratic participation, and supporting minority communities. They do not serve partisan political goals." He leaned toward Karoline, his gaze resolute. "I completely reject the accusation that I'm manipulating American politics from behind the scenes. That's a distortion of the motives and work of hundreds of people trying to do what's right." Karoline didn't flinch. She smiled, her eyes fixed on him, her voice sharp and chilling. "Not manipulating?" she asked, latching onto the civic education claim. "Then tell the public why both Daniel Harper and Sarah Mitchell, two insiders, risked everything to expose the truth, while you keep denying it." She pressed the button one last time. The screen played a montage of interview clips. Harper saying, "Emails confirm Obama requested Iran violations be kept secret." Mitchell saying, "I saw budgets funding anti-Trump groups firsthand." Karoline's voice, steady but heavy, like a hammer striking a gavel, delivered her final damning verdict. "This is the truth, Mr. Obama. Not something I fabricated, but from people who worked under you. You're not transparent. You manipulate. You didn't step back. You control." The studio was deathly silent. Those words, those images, were no longer mere back and forth. They were a fierce battle between memory, truth, and power, played out on a national stage. The atmosphere in the American Pulse studio thickened, the images from Harper and Mitchell's interview clips lingering on the screen like unhealed wounds. The host, standing at the epicenter of the two clashing forces, raised his head, his voice ringing like a final bell in a historic inquiry. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have just witnessed a fierce and unrelenting debate where truth, accusations, and political legacy were laid bare. Karoline Leavitt, representing a new generation of leadership with bold questions about power and transparency, and former President Barack Obama, defending policies that shaped America for over a decade." He turned, looking directly into the camera, his gaze piercing. "Whether you agree or disagree, whether you support Karoline or Obama, the truth is clear. Democracy is only strong when there is dialogue, when hard questions are asked, when even the most powerful figures cannot escape scrutiny." He paused, bowing slightly. "Thank you for joining us on this emotional evening. I'm Nathan Grant, and this is the American Pulse, where truth does not shy away." The stage lights softened, the frame widening as the audience began to stand, applauding, a clap both respectful and stirred. Karoline and Obama didn't shake hands, but nodded like two fighters leaving the ring, each carrying their own convictions. Outside the studio, social media erupted, a firestorm of public opinion. One account wrote, "Karoline dominated. Obama can't deny it." The left countered, "Karoline's a disruptor. Obama is a progressive icon." The media polarized. CNN called Karoline a provocateur, while Fox News hailed her as a reformer. At an outdoor public rally in Wisconsin, the vibrant sunset illuminated the stage where Karoline Leavitt stood before thousands waving "Truth First" banners. The atmosphere was electric, reflecting the wave of change sparked by the debate at the American Pulse. Cameras captured every moment, live streaming to millions. Karoline, in her navy suit, her eyes like unwavering flames, gripped the microphone, her voice resounding like a torrent. The confrontation with Mr. Obama wasn't just a debate. It was the spark igniting a movement, demanding truth from leaders. The crowd erupted in cheers, banners fluttering in the wind. From the media, the Iran deal, Obamacare to post-presidency influence. "I ask questions to reclaim American trust," she declared, her voice like a sharpened blade. The crowd continued to cheer, applause crashing like waves. Karoline pressed on, her voice like a mighty gust, capturing every heart. Journalist Daniel Harper and former staffer Sarah Mitchell risked everything to expose the truth. But it's you, the American people, who are the real force. The large screen behind displayed scenes of community workshops with Truth First banners, citizens discussing transparency, a powerful visual of the movement she had ignited. The battle for truth has just begun. Like this video, if you believe in holding power accountable, share it with everyone you know to spark the conversation. Comment below with your thoughts and predictions. What do you think will happen next? And don't forget to subscribe to join the movement and stay updated as we continue to expose the truth.